You know that feeling, right?
Mhm.
Just information overload, trying to keep up with everything happening in, say, your kid's school or just the local school community.
Oh, absolutely. All the different classes, announcements, maybe clubs.
Exactly. It feels like you're juggling a million different apps and emails. It's a lot.
It really is. So what if there was maybe a more streamlined way?
Yeah, what if schools actually had their own dedicated online places? That's kind of the core idea we're diving into today.
Precisely. We've been looking at some really interesting stuff. There's a blog post from Linkspreed that makes you think, and also a research document looking into this idea of private on-domain communities just for schools.
Right.
So our mission here really is to get a handle on why the current digital tools, the mix we have now, might not be quite hitting the mark for schools.
Yeah.
And then explore the potential of these school-owned networks. Often they're talked about using this concept called Web4.
Okay, so let's unpack that current situation first. This digital landscape most schools are in now, that blog post, it painted a pretty clear picture, didn't it?
It did. Sort of a digital maze, they called it.
Yeah, like important emails just get buried.
Mm-hmm.
Homework stuff is over in the LMS, the learning management system, club updates, maybe some random social media platform.
And then probably a totally separate app for parents and teachers to talk.
Exactly. It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but the pieces are scattered across, I don't know, a dozen different boxes.
Well, and it's not just about, the inconvenience, is it? There are also the privacy implications, which the blog post mentioned.
That's a huge point. Using public social media for school stuff, it feels a bit like privacy roulette, as they put it.
Yeah, who actually sees that information? And what happens long term when schools rely on platforms where they just don't control the data? Especially when you're talking about student data.
Really crucial questions. And then you have the LMS. I mean, they're essential for coursework, right? But the research we looked at suggests they have limits when it comes to building like real school spirit or connection. The blog post said something like, generic forums can feel outdated and disconnected. And, that rings true sometimes. They often lack that dynamic social vibe that makes an online space feel, alive.
And that ties into another point, I think.
Yeah.
Which is the lack of control schools have on these big third-party platforms.
Right.
They often can't really shape the environment to reflect their own unique values or identity. Customization is limited. Maybe moderation tools aren't quite right. They're basically borrowing space built for everyone, not specifically for them.
Okay, so this is where Web4 comes in as maybe a different way forward.
That seems to be the idea, a dedicated online platform built just for that specific school community.
And the blog post mentioned Linkspreed's Web4 SNAS social network as a service, so it's not just grabbing another app off the shelf, is it?
No, exactly. It's framed more as the school establishing its own social network, its own digital town square almost.
Interesting.
And that research document uses a similar term, on-domain communities. It describes these private branded platforms with, restricted access.
So like the school building its own secure online neighborhood just for its people, students, staff, parents.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
Okay, so practically speaking, what does a Web4 school network actually do? What are the features? The blog post talked about it being a secure haven.
Right. And a key part of that is the control element. The school owns the platform, and crucially, they own the data on it. So communication stays internal within that trusted group, and they can set up their own data protection rules, maybe aligned with standards like GDPR, which the post mentioned in passing. Basically, more privacy assurance.
Makes sense. And it also functions as a central hub. That sounds incredibly useful.
Definitely. Instead of digging through emails or checking 5 different apps, the idea is everything comes together. Announcements, class discussions, club stuff, parent info, all in one organized spot.
Just simplifying things, making information easier to find.
Exactly. But it's not just meant to be a bulletin board. It's pitched as a vibrant community space. Meaning dynamic social features. Things like profiles, news feeds, groups for specific interests or classes, tools to manage events, ways to share photos, videos.
Yeah.
All tailored for how a school actually operates.
So fostering those informal chats and peer support, things that build community.
That's the goal, yeah. Building a stronger sense of belonging.
And the last piece mentioned was a branded environment. So the school can make it look and feel like their space.
Correct. They can customize it with their logo, their colors, maybe highlight their mission or values. So the digital space really reinforces the school's identity. It strengthens that school spirit, but online.
Okay, I can see how those features fit together. Now, if we zoom out, what are the bigger potential benefits here across the whole school,
Well, think about student engagement. For starters, a dedicated space could encourage kids to connect over shared interests, things beyond just homework. That could strengthen their ties to the school itself, maybe boost morale and participation in activities.
And logistically, for teachers and staff, it sounds like a big win for communication.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Teachers could talk directly and securely with students, with parents, share materials easily. Less reliance on maybe less secure public apps.
Right. And school-wide announcements, imagine having one reliable place for those. No more, did you see the email?
Exactly. And that raises a question about learning itself. Both the blog post and the research paper suggest these kinds of dedicated spaces could really boost collaboration.
How so?
Well, project groups could have their own digital workspaces. Easier file sharing, focused discussions, better coordination, and that informal peer-to-peer learning students helping each other out that could really flourish there.
It's not just for students, though, is it? The blog post mentioned benefits for teachers and staff, too.
Absolutely. Smoother internal communication between colleagues, easier access to shared resources, better coordination that could, save time and cut down on admin headaches.
That sounds appealing.
Yeah.
And what about the parents? The homeschool connection?
That could be strengthened too. Parents might get a clearer, more secure window into what's happening at school, receiving updates, communicating with teachers more directly, feeling more involved.
Okay. And looking even further ahead, the blog post mentioned this as future-ready digital infrastructure. What does that mean?
Well, part of it is the potential for these platforms to integrate with systems the school already uses, like maybe the LMS or timetabling software.
Okay. Connect the dots.
Right. And also, it could help students develop important digital literacy skills, but within a safe, controlled environment that's directly relevant to their lives.
Gotcha. Now, that research document you mentioned, it gave this broader context with the term on-domain communities. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Sure. It really just formalizes the concepts we've been discussing. It defines them as these private, branded social network platforms with restricted access.
Okay.
And it highlights those key features again: customizable profiles, content sharing, forums, event tools, branding options, but emphasizing that the owner, in this case, the school, has control, focusing on security and the ability to tailor it.
And the research suggests this isn't just a school thing, right? This move towards private networks.
No, apparently it's a growing trend across different sectors. And the drivers seem to be those issues we touched on earlier.
Like privacy worries on public platforms.
Exactly. Privacy concerns, maybe frustration with how algorithms change on big social media sites, and just a general desire for organizations to have more control over their online brand and their user data.
So organizations are seeing value in creating their own sort of walled gardens for deeper connection.
That seems to be the idea, cultivating connection and loyalty within their own space. The research specifically drills down into the benefits and uses for schools, comparing these platforms to existing tools, especially the LMS.
Okay, perfect segue. Let's dig into that comparison. How does this Web4 idea really stack up against, say, the learning management system that most schools already have?
Well, one way to look at it is the primary purpose.
Okay.
The research points out that an LMS is mainly built for, structured content delivery, assignments, grades, course materials.
Right.
Whereas these Web4 networks, they're fundamentally about fostering that informal, real-time communication, building community spirit. Now, some LMSs are adding social features, but it's often not their core design.
So Web4 could bring in a social layer that might be missing from a traditional LMS setup.
Potentially, yes. The research notes that standard LMS platforms can sometimes lack those features we associate with social media, the news feeds, likes, comments, easy sharing things that tend to really drive engagement on these dedicated network platforms.
Right, which could lead to a stronger sense of community.
That's the suggestion. The research indicates these private networks can build a greater sense of shared identity, which can lead to more, maybe, authentic engagement. Features like profiles and dedicated discussion groups really help build those ties.
And when you want the digital space to actually feel like the school, it sounds like Web4 has the edge with customization and branding.
Yeah, the research really emphasizes that. Being able to tailor the look and feel can significantly strengthen that school identity, reflecting its values much more than a standardized LMS often can.
And what about the data privacy angle again, compared to an LMS?
And that's a big one. With a Web4 network that the school owns or directly controls, they have much more say over how user data is managed. It addresses those privacy concerns head-on, potentially offering more transparency than relying solely on an external LMS provider's policies. They can set their own rules.
But could they work together, LMS and Web4?
That's definitely part of the potential. The research mentions integration possibilities. So you could have the LMS for the core academic functions and the Web4 network for the community and communication layer, ideally linked together.
Creating a kind of unified digital ecosystem for the school.
Exactly. Leveraging what they already have while adding new capabilities. And think about content sharing beyond just formal lessons. Web4 allows for much more dynamic, user-generated stuff. Students sharing insights, resources. And enhances that informal knowledge sharing.
Okay, that clarifies the LMS comparison. What about against just, regular email and maybe old school online forums? How does Web4 compare there?
Oh, the contrast is pretty stark, I think. Email, as we know, can just become this overwhelming flood. It lacks structure for specific groups or topics within a large school community.
Totally, things get lost.
And traditional forums, well, they often feel disconnected from the school's main identity or brand, and the interfaces can feel dated. Web4 offers those dedicated, organized spaces for a specific class, a club, parents of grade 5, whatever it is. Much more targeted.
And probably more engaging than just plain text, right?
For sure. The research suggests Web4 platforms usually handle richer media, much better photos, videos, maybe polls or interactive things. That just makes the whole experience more dynamic than text-heavy email or basic forums.
Plus, it comes back to that idea of an online home for the school.
Right. It fosters that sense of identity and belonging in a way scattered emails or a generic third-party forum just can't. And the branding reinforces that constantly.
And presumably, the user experience is better, more modern interfaces, probably good mobile apps?
Generally, yes. They're often designed with that in mind. The research even floated the idea of single sign-on, SSO, which would make it super convenient for users to access one login for everything.
Okay, so let's talk specific examples. How might you see these Web4 networks being used day-to-day in different kinds of schools?
Well, the research gives some good examples. For primary and secondary schools, you could see it being huge for secure parent-teacher communication. Also, dedicated online spaces for student projects, platforms for all the clubs and after-school activities, and of course that central place for school-wide news, events, maybe even emergency alerts.
And what about higher education? Colleges, universities?
The possibilities seem even broader there. Things like vibrant alumni networks, private spaces for research groups to collaborate securely, course-specific communities where students can discuss topics and support each other, maybe even mentoring programs linking students with alumni or faculty. And you could potentially enhance existing student portals by integrating these kinds of social community features.
It really sounds like the core advantage, based on the research, is that these private networks offer more security, more privacy, and more personalization than just using public platforms.
That's a key takeaway, yes.
Yeah.
And that combination tends to foster more targeted, meaningful engagement within that specific school community.
And there were other benefits mentioned too.
Yeah, things like potentially better community support mechanisms, maybe even a slight boost for the school's visibility online, if done right. And definitely the ability to have custom moderation tools to keep the environment positive and safe.
Okay, so if we had to boil it all down, what's the main value proposition here for a school thinking about this Web4 approach? What are the absolute key takeaways from all this?
Well, drawing from both sources, I'd say the big ones are definitely improved communication and collaboration, much better than the fragmented systems now. Increased engagement from students and also from parents.
Right.
A genuinely stronger sense of community and belonging. Much greater control over the school's digital brand and how the platform is customized. And, crucially, enhanced data privacy and security.
And it's not just about replacing things, but potentially integrating and enhancing what's already there.
Exactly. The potential for seamless integration is important, and it allows for streamlining how content and knowledge are shared, going beyond just the formal curriculum.
So really, it's about fostering that knowledge exchange in a more dynamic way.
Precisely. You could frame these on-domain communities as a significant evolution for online engagement in education. They offer solutions tailored to the specific needs and headaches schools face, aiming ultimately for more connected, more engaging learning environments.
So the big picture takeaway seems to be that these dedicated Web4 networks present a pretty compelling alternative to the digital scramble many schools are dealing with now.
Yeah, it's about offering that combination of better security, stronger community, and more control, all in one place.
Which leads to a final thought, perhaps. In our increasingly digital world, just how vital is it for schools to carve out their own safe, engaging online spaces?
It's a really interesting question to ponder. And you could ask yourself, what difference could a truly dedicated platform make to the experience of learning and community in a school that you know? It definitely represents a potential shift in how we think about the school's digital presence.